The movie begins with a man frantically running through a dark forest in Ireland looking terrified. Despite repeatedly encountering signs with point of no return and various numbers indicating directions or distances, he cannot escape. Darkness swiftly engulfs the forest, birds fly overhead, and he falls into a pit. An invisible force grabs and drags him away. Meanwhile, an artist named Mina lives in another part of the country and works in a pet store. One day, her boss asks her to deliver a rare parrot to a zoo in a neighboring city, and Mina agrees. She takes the bird home for the night and confides in it about her mother's death 15 years ago, to which the parrot surprisingly responds. That evening, Mina puts on a wig, goes to a bar, and introduces herself with a fake name, claiming to be a ballerina. The next morning, she apologizes to the parrot, saying the real her wouldn't be liked. They then set off on their journey. During the trip, Mina's sister Lucy calls, reminding her that she has family and nieces who love and miss her. Mina continues driving and eventually finds herself on a road leading into an old, dark forest. Suddenly, her car breaks down and her phone loses connection. Carrying the parrot's cage, she steps onto the road to seek help, but the forest is dark and empty. When she returns to where she left the car, it has disappeared. She wanders through the quickly darkening forest, talking to the bird to stay cheerful and suggesting they name it Darwin. Suddenly, she sees a woman running past and decides to follow her. Mina catches up to her near a small forest cabin. The woman opening the door urgently tells Mina to come inside if she wants to live. Mina rushes in, and the elderly woman named Maline explains that she has been living there for some time with two other young people, Carrera and Daniel. Maline orders Mina to stand in front of a mirror because the watchers, who come every night after sunset, cannot enter the cabin but can observe from outside. Standing by the mirror, Mina hears sounds like applause. Maline confirms that the watchers are applauding the appearance of a new object. In the morning, Mina announces her intention to leave, though the others insist it's impossible. She heads into the forest, but Maline catches up with her, explaining that the forest causes hallucinations, but survival is possible. The signs throughout the forest mark the boundary from which a person can reach the cabin before dark, but beyond the boundary, there's no way back. These signs were made by a man known as the Professor, whose current whereabouts are unknown. That night, Daniel puts on a show for the watchers, presenting Mina as the newcomer, but they ask her to behave as usual. Meanwhile, Sierra turns on the music and dances, as she does every evening. Mina finds discs with recordings of Love Search TV shows. In the morning, Mina and Sierra go to gather medicinal herbs as Sierra's missing husband asked her to take care of Daniel before he went searching for a way out and disappeared. Sierra explains that they recently found strange burrows scattered throughout the forest, where she believes the watchers go during daylight hours. She estimates she has been in the cabin for almost 5 months. Later, Maline announces the safety rules. Never leave at night, never open the doors for anyone, and always try to stay in the light. Strange days follow with an identical routine. Mina watches endless TV shows and often stares into the mirror. One day, she knocks on the mirror, and immediately hears a knock on the door. Maline orders everyone to freeze and everything stops. The next day, Mina and Daniel go hunting. Daniel tells her that Maline used to work at the university and considers herself knowledgeable, but she has been living in the cabin the longest. Daniel himself has been there for 8 months, has never seen anyone else. After listening to the boy, Mina convinces Daniel to help her explore a burrow using a rope. Mina descends, explores it, and finds old items, newspapers, toys, pieces of electronics, and an old bicycle. She ties the bicycle to the rope and sends it up, but then strange sounds similar to those heard at night outside the cabin echo from the darkness. Mina screams, and the rope falls at her feet. Climbing out into the light, she leaves the dangerous place, and they calmly examine the items. They think the bicycle might be a means of escape, but Maline reacts strangely to this discovery. Meanwhile, Daniel assembles a surveillance system from the found pieces of electronics and installs a camera by the door. That night, everything proceeds as usual. Sierra dances when there is a knock on the door. Daniel suggests that a person has come, but Maline forbids opening it. They hear the voice of Sierra's husband. Sierra tries to verify it is him by asking what book she is reading, but he does not answer, though they bought the book together on his advice. The man begs to be saved from death. Sierra asks to look into the camera, but when he leans towards it, something drags him into the forest. Immediately, there is a knock on the mirror, stronger than ever before. Maline stands in front of the people, shielding them, and the knocking stops. In the morning, Maline throws the bicycle into the burrow, demanding that they no longer break the rules. Later, Mina recalls her sister and mother who invited the girls for a car ride. The weather was beautiful, and Mina opened the window. Her mother asked her to close it because the wind was bothering her, but Mina didn't listen. Mimicking her mother, who got distracted from the road, a tragedy occurred for which Mina still feels guilty. Winter soon arrives, the days grow shorter, the nights colder, and food becomes increasingly scarce. Quarrels begin to flare up among the cabin's inhabitants. One day, Sierra leaves for the forest. Mina catches up with her, and Sierra confesses that she felt John was real. They run back to the house, hearing Daniel's screams, angry with Malign and Mina for refusing to let them inside. The women hide under a tree and soon see lanky, spider-like monsters emerging from the forest, approaching the cabin window and making terrible shrill noises. The Watchers stare at Daniel and Carrara, while Mina and Malign wait for them to leave so they can return to the cabin. Once the Watchers depart, the women rush to the door and beg to be let in. Daniel initially refuses, but Mina shares her guilt about her mother's death, asking him to understand the lifelong suffering of feeling responsible for someone's death. Realizing the weight of her words, Daniel opens the door. The four of them immediately stand in front of the mirror, hoping to convince the Watchers they are still in place. Malign admits she tried to protect them from certain truths. She explains that she used to teach history and mythology and came to this place voluntarily, unlike the others. Only here did she realize how dangerous it was. Once, while hunting alone, she saw herself at sunset, not an exact copy, but very similar. She explains that the Watchers are an ancient species with many names: changelings, winged ones, fairies. They study people to impersonate them and will never let them leave. Outside, they hear the voices of the cabin's inhabitants. Then Daniel discovers a hatch in the floor that they didn't know existed. Descending, they find a well-fortified living space filled with food and equipment. Mina turns on an old computer and a video recording shows the face of the professor, whose real name was Rory Kilmartin. He was the first to study the Watchers and tried to learn about their origins. In 1979, the scientist found this place, which he called Wonderland. Every evening, the Watchers came to his window and studied him for many years. Initially, his colleagues laughed at him, not believing his tales. He built this bunker using labor from nearby remote villages, choosing lonely people or those with bad habits so their disappearance wouldn't attract much attention, and every evening he convinced them to have dinner. Outdoors, hiding inside, the professor watched the Watchers and dealt with them, thus building the bunker on blood. One day, a Watcher appeared before him as a girl with red hair, different from the others, curious and seemingly harmless. He realized that unlocking the secrets of the fairies might even conquer death. He did the impossible, lured this girl into a cage, and began experiments on communication, trying to befriend her. She sometimes turned into a frightening creature with long arms, but seemed to listen to him. Gradually, she became close and understandable to him. However, the professor realized he had achieved nothing significant and was ready to end his life. He hid a boat by the river, the only way out, and asked the survivor to go to his university office and destroy all the documents found there. He decided to stay here forever. In the last recording, they see Kilmartin climbing up, hear gunshots, and then all goes quiet. Realizing that this is their last night in the forest, Sierra turns on the music and invites Daniel to dance, but he seems upset about leaving. He says his family is dysfunctional and he has nowhere to return to. Sierra offers to let him stay with her for a while until they find him a good occupation and place to live, as they have become good friends. In the morning, the group sets out to escape, guided by the signs and Mina's parrot, whom she asks to lead them. Soon, they reach a massive stone disc in the ground covering the entrance to a huge tunnel. Malign explains that this is where the last representatives of the ancient fairy race were locked up, who were once very friendly with humans. After many centuries, they managed to surface, but now the friendship has turned into hatred. They stay here because they are held by magic, so the group needs to run far away. They walk all day. Dusk falls, but there is no river or boat in sight. It starts raining, and they fall into despair until they see huge flocks of birds flying in one direction. They run after them and reach the river. The women rush to the boat, but Daniel hears screams behind him and sees John. He returns, rejoicing that John survived, but it turns out to be a changeling. The women scream, begging Daniel to run, but he doesn't hear and dies at the hands of the Watcher, who then takes on his form. As Malign, Mina, and Sierra sail down the river, they wake up in the boat to find they've returned to civilization. They stop a bus and ride to the city, listening to music and finally realizing their ordeal is over. Later, Mina goes to the university where Kilmartin worked, posing as his niece to access his office and fulfill his last request. There she finds more documents, photos, and a recording in which he discusses the fairies and mentions that there are still half-blood children in the world. Mina finds a stack of photos and is very surprised by what she sees. In the evening, Mina goes to Sierra's house and shows her a photo of Malign from the professor's belongings, explaining that it is of his wife who died several years ago. This reveals that the Malign they lived with in the cabin was a special fairy capable of moving during the day. She was the one Kilmartin had caught but couldn't kill, and she took on Malign's form to return to civilization. Just then, a car pulls up to the house and the real Sierra gets out, exposing the Sierra Mina was talking to as a fairy. Realizing she has been exposed, the fairy knocks Mina out and changes shape again, turning into Daniel. The fairy explains that they just want to live like other species, but are forced to stay underground due to human hatred. The fairy then transforms into Kill Martin and goes to Mina in the house, changing into her and preparing to kill her. However, Mina tells the fairy that there are others like her somewhere because she is half human and acknowledges that it was unfair of humans to banish the fairies from their world. The fairy softens, spreads her wings, admits that Mina might be right, and flies away. Mina revives Sierra and later she reunites with her twin sister Lucy, finally forgiving herself for their mother's death. She tells her about her experience, admitting that she still sees Malene appearing in the forms of other people. Her niece arrives to show Mina a drawing of her and Darwin, whom she still keeps as a pet. Meanwhile, outside, a girl with red hair appears, looking at their apartment windows and taking on the form of a girl with a strange face. This story is not a typical horror movie, but rather a scary bedtime story, building up slowly and tastefully, with a mysterious but somewhat mundane ending. Make sure to subscribe for more recaps like this.